I worked at Vertex Marketing, a sleek glass tower in downtown Manhattan where appearances were everything. Everyone wore designer labels, carried expensive bags, and talked endlessly about where they shopped. There was this unspoken pressure to look wealthy, to fit in, to prove you belonged. But I had never cared about that. I shopped at thrift stores and vintage boutiques, hunting for beautiful pieces that other people overlooked. I loved the hunt, the discovery, the way a perfectly tailored jacket from the 1970s could make me feel more confident than anything from a fancy boutique. My coworkers did not understand it. They thought I was being cheap or trying to make some kind of statement. But it was not about money or rebellion. It was about finding real quality, real craftsmanship, and creating my own style. I was Amelia. And I refused to be someone I was not, even in a world that demanded it. Then there was Veronica Sterling. She was the senior marketing director, and her entire identity was built on luxury brands. Her office looked like a magazine spread, filled with designer bags displayed on floating shelves like art pieces. She wore a different outfit every single day, each one more expensive than the last. She made sure everyone knew exactly how much everything cost too. She would casually drop the price of her shoes into conversations, mention which exclusive boutique she had visited over the weekend, and judge everyone around her based on the labels they wore. If you were not wearing something designer, you were invisible to her. Or worse, you were a target. She had this way of looking at people, scanning them from head to toe, and deciding their worth in seconds. And she made sure they knew what she thought. I had watched her do it to others for months. I just never thought I would be next. The first time I really noticed how cruel she could be was on a random Tuesday morning. A junior assistant named Kelly had come to work wearing a pretty floral scarf. It was bright and cheerful, and she seemed so happy about it. Veronica walked past her desk, stopped, and made this big show of examining the scarf. "Oh, how lovely," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Where did you get it?" Kelly smiled, clearly flattered by the attention. "Just from Target," she said. It was on sale. The change in Veronica's face was instant. Her smile disappeared, replaced by a look of disgust, like Kelly had said something offensive. "Target," she repeated, grimacing. "Oh, dear. We really must aim higher than that, mustn't we?" She patted Kelly's shoulder in this condescending way and walked off. I saw Kelly's face fall. I saw the excitement drain right out of her. And I felt something cold settle in my chest. This woman was poison. What Veronica did not know, what nobody at Vertex really understood, was that my thrift store shopping was not just a hobby. It was an education. I had spent years learning about fabric quality, construction techniques, and timeless design. I could tell the difference between real silk and polyester blend just by touch. I knew how to spot hand-stitched seams and quality linings. I could identify designer pieces from their cut and drape, even without seeing the label. Thrifting had taught me to see past the marketing and the price tags and recognize actual value. And lately, I had been applying that same skill to something else. I had started researching small fashion brands online, studying their business models, looking at their financials when they were publicly available. I was not doing it for any particular reason at first. I was just curious. I just wanted to understand the industry better. But that curiosity was about to become very, very useful. In late October, the company announced the annual Winter Gala. It was the biggest event of the year, held at some fancy hotel ballroom with champagne and a live band. Everyone dressed up like it was the Met Gala. It was basically a competition to see who could wear the most expensive outfit. Most people stressed about it for weeks. But I was excited for a different reason. I had found the perfect dress 3 months earlier at a vintage shop in Brooklyn. It was an emerald green silk gown from the 1960s, with elegant long sleeves and a flowing skirt that moved like water. The original owner had clearly taken incredible care of it. I had spent weeks carefully restoring it, repairing a tiny tear in the hem, replacing a broken zipper, steaming out decades-old creases. When I finally tried it on the night before the gala, I felt beautiful. I felt like myself. I could not wait to wear it. The night of the gala arrived. I spent an hour getting ready, carefully styling my hair, choosing simple jewelry that would not compete with the dress. When I looked in the mirror, I smiled. I looked elegant, classic, timeless. I felt confident. I took a cab to the hotel, walked through the lobby, and stepped into the ballroom. The room was stunning, filled with twinkling lights and decorated tables. Music played softly in the background. People were already mingling, drinks in hand, laughing and talking. I walked in, looking around for familiar faces. And then I saw Veronica. She was standing near the bar with a group of her usual admirers, all of them dressed in obvious designer gowns. She was wearing something black and sparkly, probably worth more than my monthly rent. Our eyes met across the room. And I watched her face change. She said something to her group, and they all turned to look at me. Then she started walking in my direction. Veronica glided over with her entourage following behind her like ducklings. She did not smile. She did not say hello. She just stopped right in front of me, looked me up and down slowly, and tilted her head. "Amelia," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "What an interesting choice." Her tone made it clear that interesting was not a compliment. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept my smile. "Thank you," I said calmly. She circled around me like she was examining a sculpture. "Is this vintage?" she asked, saying the word like it meant garbage. "It is," I said. "1960s, I think." She laughed, sharp and mean. "How very thrifty of you," she said. Then she delivered the line that would change everything. "Did you get it from a washing machine at a laundromat? Because it has that kind of worn, donated look." Her friends laughed. The people around us tried to hide their smirks. And I just stood there, feeling my face burn with humiliation. The worst part was not what Veronica said. It was how everyone reacted. The nervous giggles from people who should have known better. The pitying looks from coworkers who were glad it was not them being targeted. The way conversations around us stopped, and people turned to watch the show. I felt myself shrinking inside the dress I had loved so much just an hour earlier. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to defend myself, to say something clever that would put her in her place. But my voice would not work. My throat felt tight. All I could do was nod, force a smile, and excuse myself. I walked to the bathroom as calmly as I could, locked myself in a stall, and stood there shaking. I looked down at my beautiful emerald dress, the one I had spent weeks restoring, the one that had made me feel so confident. And I realized something. This was not just about me. This was about every person Veronica had ever made feel small. I did not stay at the gala long. I left early, went home, hung up my dress, and sat on my couch in the dark. But something had shifted inside me. The humiliation was still there, burning in my chest. But underneath it was something else. Something cold and clear and focused. Resolve. Veronica had not just insulted my outfit. She had revealed exactly who she was. A person who measured worth by price tags. A person who used cruelty to feel powerful. A person who built her entire identity on superficial things. And people like that always had weaknesses. They always had blind spots. I just needed to find hers. I opened my laptop, poured myself a glass of wine, and started researching. Not fashion. Not vintage clothing. Veronica Sterling herself. Her social media. Her interviews. Her business ventures. And especially something she mentioned constantly at work. Her passion project. Her fashion brand. Sterling style. Monday morning, I walked into Vertex like nothing had happened. I wore one of my usual thrifted outfits, smiled at my coworkers, and sat down at my desk. People avoided my eyes. A few gave me sympathetic smiles. Nobody mentioned the gala. But Veronica was in rare form. She was practically glowing, energized by her cruelty. She spent the morning walking around the office, chatting loudly about the gala, about fashion, about style. And she talked endlessly about Sterling Style, her fashion brand. She always did this. She would complain about it constantly, making it sound like she was dealing with impossible challenges that only someone as brilliant as her could handle. The manufacturers are so lazy, she would say. The customers just do not get my vision. Everything is so expensive, but you cannot compromise on quality. I had heard it all 100 times before. But now I was listening differently. Now I was hearing something else underneath the complaints. Desperation. Problems. A business that was not going well. Over the next few weeks, Veronica's complaints about Sterling Style became more frequent and more specific. She talked about production delays, about suppliers demanding payment up front, about marketing campaigns that were not working. She would sit in the break room during lunch and vent to anyone who would listen, treating her business struggles like they were fascinating drama. Everyone else just nodded and made sympathetic sounds. But I listened carefully. I took mental notes. One afternoon, she mentioned having to use her Vertex salary to cover a shortfall in her business account. She said it casually, like it was just a temporary thing, like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal. It meant her business was not generating enough money to sustain itself. It meant she was keeping it alive through her day job. And if that was true, it meant Sterling Style was in serious trouble. That night, I changed my research strategy completely. My lunch breaks became research sessions. I stopped browsing vintage clothing sites and started digging into business information instead. I looked up Sterling Style in business registries. I found their company filings. I searched for customer reviews on every platform I could find. I studied fashion industry reports and market analysis. I learned everything I could about how small fashion brands operated, what made them succeed, and what made them fail. And the more I learned about Sterling Style specifically, the more interesting things became. The brand had been around for 3 years. It sold overpriced basics and trendy pieces through a small website and one pop-up shop in Soho. And according to the dozens of reviews I found, customers hated it. Terrible quality for the price. Rude customer service. Items fell apart after one wash. Shipping took months. It was a disaster. A beautifully packaged, expensively marketed disaster. And Veronica had no idea how bad it really was. The real breakthrough came when I discovered Sterling Style's financial situation. Small businesses sometimes have to file certain documents publicly, especially if they are seeking loans or investors. I found Sterling Style's information buried in a business database. The numbers were shocking. The company was drowning in debt. They owed money to manufacturers, suppliers, and a small business lender. Their revenue was a fraction of their expenses. They were burning through cash at an unsustainable rate. Veronica was using her Vertex salary to plug holes, but it was like trying to stop a flood with a paper towel. The brand was failing. It was only a matter of time before it collapsed completely. And Veronica was too prideful or too delusional to see it. She kept talking about her brand like it was the next big thing, like success was right around the corner. But the numbers told a very different story. And I had all of them saved on my laptop, organized in a neat little folder. I decided to make my first move. I needed more detailed financial information, the kind that only investors or potential investors could access. So I created a new email address, something professional and generic. I used it to sign up for Sterling Styles' investor newsletter. A lot of small brands have these to attract potential funding. You just fill out a form saying you are interested in investment opportunities, and they send you their pitch deck and financial reports. It took 3 days for Sterling Style to respond. When the email arrived, I felt my heart racing as I downloaded the attachments. There it was. Everything. Their full financial statements, their profit and loss reports, their debt breakdown, their projections. I spent an entire evening reading through every page, highlighting key numbers, making notes. And with each page, my plan became clearer. This was not just a struggling business. This was a ticking time bomb. And I was going to be there when it exploded. The reports I received were even worse than I had imagined. Sterling Style had defaulted on a small business loan 2 months ago and was currently in negotiations with the lender. They owed over $200,000 to various creditors. Their inventory was overpriced and not selling. They had barely any cash reserves. The projections showed that without a major capital injection, the company would be insolvent within 6 months. Veronica had built her entire brand identity around luxury and exclusivity, but the reality was that she had no business sense. She had spent money on expensive marketing and fancy packaging while ignoring the fundamentals. Quality. Customer service. Realistic pricing. The brand was nothing but smoke and mirrors, wrapped in pretty tissue paper and tied with a silk ribbon. And that tissue paper was about to catch fire. I closed my laptop and smiled. I did not need to destroy Veronica's business. She had already done that herself. I just needed to be patient. And be ready to make my move at exactly the right time. Meanwhile, back at Vertex, Veronica was getting bolder with her comments about me. The gala had emboldened her. She started making little jokes in team meetings, always with that fake sweet tone that made them sound almost friendly. Amelia has such a consistent aesthetic, she would say, gesturing at my outfit. So dedicated to her thrift store treasures. People would laugh uncomfortably. I would smile and say nothing. She thought my silence meant I was beaten. She thought I was too embarrassed to fight back. But really, I was just waiting. Every insult, every condescending comment, every dismissive look just added fuel to the cold fire burning inside me. I was not hurt anymore. I was focused. I went to work every day, did my job perfectly, and spent my free time planning. I met with my financial advisor, a woman I had been working with for years to manage my savings and investments. I asked her about business acquisitions. I asked about buying distressed assets. And I asked her one very specific question. If a fashion brand fails, who owns its debt and its remaining assets? My financial advisor, Karen, looked at me with curiosity when I started asking questions about buying failed businesses. This is new territory for you, she said. What are you thinking about? I pulled out my folder of research on Sterling Style. I showed her everything. The financial reports. The debt breakdown. The declining sales. The overpriced inventory sitting in a warehouse somewhere. If this company defaults completely, I asked, what happens to it? Karen studied the documents carefully. The bank or lender who holds the debt would seize the assets, she explained. They would try to recover as much money as possible. Usually by liquidating inventory and selling the brand name, trademarks, any remaining value. She looked up at me. These assets usually sell for pennies on the dollar. Banks just want to recover something and move on. I felt my pulse quicken. So theoretically, I said slowly, someone could buy a failed fashion brand, along with all its inventory and intellectual property, for a fraction of what it originally cost? Karen smiled. Theoretically, yes. Why? Do you have cash you haven't told me about? I did have cash. More than most people realized. I had been saving aggressively since I started working. I lived modestly, shopped second-hand, and invested wisely. My portfolio was healthy. And if I liquidated certain investments, I could access enough cash to make a significant offer on a distressed asset. But I was not ready to move yet. This was not about sabotage or revenge. This was about patience and timing. Veronica's business was going to fail on its own. Her poor decisions, her lack of business knowledge, her focus on image over substance, all of it was leading to inevitable collapse. I just needed to wait for that collapse to happen. And when it did, I needed to be ready to act immediately. So I kept watching. I kept researching. I set up alerts for Sterling Style's business filings. And I waited. Karen helped me prepare. We organized my finances. We researched the legal process for buying distressed assets. We prepared documents. And we kept everything completely confidential. Nobody at Vertex had any idea what I was planning. Especially not Veronica. The critical moment came in late January. I walked into work on a Monday morning, and the energy in the office was strange. People were whispering. Veronica's door was closed, which was unusual. She always kept it open to show off her designer-filled office. Around 10 a.m., she emerged. And she looked terrible. Her makeup was perfect as always, but her face was tight with stress. Her movements were sharp and jerky. She snapped at her assistant for no reason. She slammed her office door so hard the walls shook. By lunchtime, the gossip had spread. Apparently, Veronica had been on a phone call all morning, and people had heard her yelling. Someone said they heard her say something about a key investor pulling out. Another person said she was talking about bank accounts and payment deadlines. I sat at my desk, pretending to work, but my heart was racing. This was it. Something big was happening with Sterling Style. That night, I checked my email alerts. And there it was. A notice that Sterling Style had officially defaulted on their small business loan. The default notice was public record, filed with the county business office. It showed that Sterling Style had failed to make loan payments for 3 consecutive months and was now in default. The lender, a small business financing company, had issued a formal notice of debt collection. According to the filing, they were beginning the process of seizing assets to recover the debt. I read the document 3 times, making sure I understood every detail. Then I called Karen. "It is happening," I said. "The brand is defaulting. The lender is seizing assets." There was a pause. Then Karen said, "So we move now?" I took a deep breath. Yes. We move now. Over the next week, Karen and I worked quickly and quietly. She contacted the lending company on my behalf. She explained that I was interested in purchasing the defaulted loan and all associated assets. The lender was surprisingly receptive. They did not want to deal with the hassle of liquidating a fashion brand. They just wanted their money back, or at least some of it. We negotiated. We reviewed documents. And we made an offer. A very low offer. Pennies on the dollar, just like Karen had said. The offer was accepted within 48 hours. The lender was relieved to get anything back at all. The legal paperwork moved surprisingly fast. Within 2 weeks, I was the new owner of Sterling Style. I owned the brand name. I owned the trademarks. I owned the remaining inventory, sitting in a warehouse in New Jersey. And I owned all the debt that came with it. But because I had purchased it for such a low price, the debt was manageable. Veronica had no idea any of this was happening. The business had been taken from her quietly, through legal processes she had not been paying attention to. She still came to work every day, still talked about her brand like it was hers, still complained about temporary setbacks. But Sterling Style did not belong to her anymore. It belonged to me. And now I needed to tell her. I rented a small conference room at a neutral office building in Midtown. I sent Veronica an email from an anonymous business address, pretending to be a potential investor who wanted to discuss opportunities with Sterling Style. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. I arrived early, wearing one of my favorite thrifted outfits, a perfectly tailored vintage blazer and simple black pants. I sat at the conference table and waited. When Veronica walked in, she was all smiles, clearly excited to meet this mysterious investor. She was dressed in head-to-toe designer, carrying her expensive bag, radiating false confidence. Then she saw me. Her smile froze. Her eyes went wide with confusion. "Amelia," she said, looking around like maybe she was in the wrong room. "What are you doing here? Where is the investor?" I gestured calmly to the chair across from me. "Please sit down, Veronica." She did not move. "I do not understand. What is this?" I opened my folder and pulled out the legal documents. I slid them across the table toward her. "This is a meeting about Sterling Style," I said. "Your brand. Except it is not your brand anymore." She stared at the papers without touching them. "What are you talking about?" I looked her directly in the eyes. "Your brand failed. You defaulted on your loan. The bank seized your assets. And I bought them." Veronica's face went completely white. She grabbed the documents with shaking hands and started reading. I watched her eyes scan the pages, seeing her own company name, seeing my name listed as the new owner, seeing the date of the transaction. "This is not possible," she whispered. "This cannot be real." Her voice got louder. "How could you afford this? You shop at thrift stores. You live in a tiny apartment. You are nobody." I kept my voice calm and steady. "While you were spending thousands of dollars on handbags and designer clothes," I said, "I was saving and investing. I was learning about business and finance. I was building something real." She was shaking now, her perfect composure completely shattered. "You cannot just take my brand. I will sue you. I will fight this." I shook my head. Everything was done legally. Your brand failed because of your own mismanagement. The bank seized it. I made a legitimate offer. They accepted. It is done. I paused. Sterling Style belongs to me now. And I have plans for it. Veronica's hands gripped the edge of the table. What plans? She demanded. What are you going to do with it? I leaned back in my chair. I am going to rebuild it, I said simply. I am going to turn it into something sustainable and accessible. Quality pieces at honest prices. Ethical manufacturing. Transparent business practices. Everything your version was not. Her face twisted with rage and disbelief. You do not know anything about fashion. I smiled. I know more than you think. That thrift store you mocked? It taught me to recognize real quality. It taught me to see past marketing and hype and recognize actual value. Something you never learned because you were too busy worrying about labels. I stood up and gathered my papers. Sterling style will still exist. But it will stand for something better now. Something that does not make people feel small for shopping within their means. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Oh, and Veronica? You might want to update your LinkedIn. I believe you are between fashion ventures now. As Veronica sat there, frozen in shock, I reached into my bag and pulled out one last thing. A small envelope. I walked back to the table and set it in front of her. What is that? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. A gift, I said. It is a gift card to that boutique you were always talking about. The one in Soho where you buy your overpriced basics. She stared at it like it might explode. I do not want your charity. I shrugged. It is not charity. Consider it a thank you. If you had not mocked my thrift store dress that night, I might never have looked into your business. I might never have discovered what a disaster it was. So really, you gave me this opportunity. I turned to leave again, then added over my shoulder, although I have to warn you, that boutique might be a bit expensive for you now. I hear their pieces are overpriced for the quality. I walked out of that conference room and did not look back. I did not gloat. I did not celebrate loudly. I just went home, changed into comfortable clothes, and started working on my new business plan. Sterling style was going to become something better. Something real. And the woman who had mocked my thrift store outfit had just handed me the keys to her kingdom. Sometimes revenge is not about destroying someone. It is about building something better from the ruins of their arrogance. And that felt better than any designer dress ever could.